Welcome to Hollywood Secrets Information. And in this video, we are going to uncover 12 films from the 1970s that were so controversial when they were released that they nearly disappeared from history. The 1970s was one of the boldest decades in movie history. During the era of New Hollywood, filmmakers were suddenly given more creative freedom than ever before. Directors pushed boundaries, challenged social norms, and explored darker themes that traditional studios had once avoided. But while some movies changed cinema forever, others shocked audiences so deeply that they were banned, censored, heavily criticized, or quietly buried by studios. Tonight, we're diving into 12 unforgettable films that sparked outrage, confusion, and heated debates. Movies that nearly vanished from theaters and history itself. 12. The Deer Hunter, 1978. Released in 1978 and directed by Michael Cimino, The Deer Hunter arrived during a time when the wounds of the Vietnam War were still fresh in American society. The film followed a group of working-class friends whose lives are shattered by the war. While the movie later became critically acclaimed, it sparked immediate controversy for its brutal psychological depiction of prisoners forced into Russian roulette games. Critics debated whether these scenes were historically accurate or exploitative, and some audiences found the film emotionally overwhelming. Despite the backlash, the movie went on to win multiple awards, including Best Picture at the Academy Awards, eventually becoming one of the most powerful war films ever made. 11. Pretty Baby, 1978. Directed by Louis Malle and released in 1978, Pretty Baby quickly became one of the most debated films of its era. Set in early 20th century New Orleans, the film starred Brooke Shield in a role that shocked audiences because of its mature subject matter involving life inside a brothel. During the late 1970s, society was already debating the limits of artistic freedom in cinema, and this film became a flashpoint. Critics argued over whether it was a serious artistic exploration or something deeply inappropriate. Several countries restricted or censored the movie, and it faced distribution problems in certain markets. Over time, however, film historians began discussing it as a controversial but significant example of boundary-pushing storytelling from the New Hollywood period. 10. Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, 1974. In 1974, director Sam Peckinpah delivered one of the strangest revenge films of the decade with Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. Known for his gritty filmmaking style, Peckinpah created a violent and morally complex story about a desperate man hunting down a bounty in Mexico. At the time, critics and audiences were stunned by the film's dark tone, graphic violence, and bleak worldview. The movie performed poorly at the box office and was dismissed by many reviewers as excessive and disturbing. Some theaters even refused to screen it. Yet, decades later, the film gained a strong cult following, with modern critics praising its raw intensity and its reflection of the chaotic filmmaking spirit of the 1970s. 9. The Brood, 1979. Released in 1979 and directed by David Cronenberg, The Brood shocked audiences with its disturbing psychological horror themes. During the late 1970s, horror cinema was evolving rapidly, but Cronenberg's unique style, later known as body horror, pushed audiences far outside their comfort zones. The story explored experimental psychotherapy and the terrifying consequences of suppressed emotions. Critics were deeply divided, with some calling the film brilliant, while others labeled it disturbing and inappropriate. Certain regions limited its distribution because of its intense imagery and themes. Over time, however, The movie became recognized as an important early work from Cronenberg and a milestone in psychological horror filmmaking. 8. Caligula, 1979. Few films from the 1970s created as much controversy as Caligula, released in 1979 and directed by Tinto Brass. The film attempted to portray the chaotic reign of the Roman Emperor Caligula with lavish sets and a star-studded cast, including Malcolm McDowell. However, the production became infamous when explicit scenes were added after filming without the approval of many actors and creators. The movie was banned or heavily censored in several countries and became a symbol of how far filmmakers could push boundaries. Despite the scandal, it remains one of the most talked about historical epics ever made, largely because of its troubled production and controversial release. 7. Myra Breckinridge, 1970. When Myra Breckinridge premiered in 1970, it immediately caused confusion and outrage. Directed by Michael Sarn and based on a novel by Gore Vidal, the film attempted to explore gender identity and Hollywood culture through satire. However, its experimental style and provocative humor left many audiences baffled. Critics harshly attacked the film, and it quickly developed a reputation as one of the most controversial studio releases of the decade. In the conservative climate of the early 1970s, many viewers were not ready for its themes, and the film struggled commercially. Yet today, it is often discussed as an unusual and daring piece of cinema that attempted to challenge traditional Hollywood storytelling. 6. 100 Rifles, 1969. Although released in 1969, 100 Rifles became widely discussed throughout the early 1970s for its controversial casting and themes. Directed by Tom Grease, the film starred Jim Brown and Raquel Welch. At the time, their on-screen romantic scenes sparked debate because interracial relationships were still considered highly controversial in mainstream cinema. Some theaters in conservative regions refused to screen the movie, and critics argued about whether the film was pushing social boundaries or exploiting them for publicity. Despite the controversy, the film became an important moment in Hollywood history as the industry slowly began embracing more diverse representation on screen. 5. The Wicker Man, 1973. Released in 1973 and directed by Robin Hardy, The Wicker Man initially struggled to find an audience. The film told a mysterious story about a police officer investigating strange rituals on a remote island. What made it controversial was its unsettling exploration of pagan traditions and religious conflict, themes that were extremely sensitive in the early 1970s. The studio even shortened the movie dramatically before release, fearing audiences might reject its unusual narrative. Critics were initially divided, but over time the film gained recognition for its haunting atmosphere and bold storytelling. Today, it is widely considered one of the greatest folk horror films ever made. 4. Midnight Cowboy, 1969. Directed by John Schlesinger, Midnight Cowboy was released in 1969 but dominated discussions in the early 1970s due to its controversial themes. The film starred Dustin Hoffman and Jon Voight and explored loneliness, survival, and life on the margins of society in New York City. At the time, the movie received an X rating in the United States, which severely limited its promotion and distribution. Despite this obstacle, the film achieved massive critical success and eventually won Best Picture at the Academy Awards. Its success proved that even controversial films could achieve lasting cultural impact. 3. Lipstick, 1976. In 1976, director Lamont Johnson released Lipstick, a courtroom drama that generated intense debate upon its release. Starring sisters Margot Hemingway and Mariel Hemingway, the film attempted to tackle serious issues surrounding justice and trauma. However, critics argued that its approach was sensationalized, and advocacy groups criticized the film for exploiting sensitive subject matter. The controversy made the movie difficult to market, and some theaters hesitated to show it. Despite the backlash, the film remains an example of how 1970s cinema increasingly attempted to address difficult social issues, even when audiences were not fully ready for those conversations. 2. Sweet Movie, 1974. One of the most shocking films of the decade was Sweet Movie, directed by Dusan Makavejev in 1974. Known for his experimental filmmaking, Makavejev created a surreal satire that blended politics, sexuality, and social commentary in ways that shocked audiences around the world. The film was banned or heavily restricted in several countries, and critics were sharply divided over whether it was a work of genius or pure provocation. Because of these controversies, the movie disappeared from many theaters shortly after its release. Over time, however, it gained attention among film scholars as one of the most daring and unconventional works of the decade. 1. Mumsy, Nanny, Sonny, and Girly, 1970. Released in 1970 and directed by Freddie Francis. Mumsy, Nanny, Sonny, and Girly was a dark British thriller that confused and disturbed audiences upon release. The film tells the bizarre story of a strange family who lure strangers into their home and treat them as toys in twisted games. Its unusual tone, mixing dark humor with psychological horror, left many viewers unsure how to react. Because of its unsettling themes, the movie struggled to find mainstream success and quickly faded from theaters. Yet in later decades, the film developed a cult following among fans of unconventional British cinema. The 1970s was a decade when filmmakers took enormous risks. Some of those risks changed cinema forever, while others pushed audiences so far that the films were rejected, censored, or nearly forgotten. Yet many of these controversial movies later found new life as cult classics, proving that bold storytelling often takes time to be understood. If you enjoyed discovering these hidden and controversial pieces of movie history, make sure to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments about which film surprised you the most. And don't forget to subscribe to Hollywood Secrets Information for more fascinating stories from the world of cinema.